Yeah, good evening, all of you. Indeed, I'm very happy to be presenting this webinar to all of you on behalf of FACS Foundation. Very fortunate to have amongst us and joining the panel will be Dr. Senior most cardiologist of our country. When we were students, we all used to cherish his name with
Thank you.
equivalent
Thank
to
you.
left main management disease. And as you know, Dr. D.S. Gambhir, Dr. Daljit Singh Gambhir doesn't need introduction, but as a formality, I thought I would just introduce to all of you. He's the director of cardiology, Kailash Group of Hospitals. As you know, he's one of the senior most cardiologists and Padma Shri awardee, and he has more than 13,000 angioplasties to his credit. And before anybody started doing left main, I think in a young left main tight stenosis, he did a left main angioplasty. He was also first to do laser angioplasty. A lot of innovative pioneering work in Asia has been also done. He was the first in also doing atherectomy procedures. And I came to know just that chemical ablation of AV node was also done by Dr. Gambhir for the first time. And to his credit, he has more than 200 publications, and he has trained a lot of young cardiologists across the country. Indeed, I feel very fortunate to be participating in this webinar along with Dr. Gambhir. Thank you, Dr. Gambhir, sir, for this
Most
opportunity.
welcome.
And I thank Abbott Vascular for making this possible, for sponsoring this program of this evening. What we thought is we will share with you the newer data. As Dr. Gambhir is given time, anyway, we want to discuss something on left main. And a lot of new data has also come up in left main coronary angioplasty. Especially, a lot of us were worried to do bifurcation. There's more data coming up. So that's how we titled this as Management of Left Main Coronary Artery Bifurcation. Is DES an alternative to CABG? So I think many of us initially thought that stenting should not be done, but we have come a long way. I will walk you through this data of how the left main angioplasty evolved. And to 2020, though it is now we are all worried because it's COVID going on with coronavirus. But in spite of all these tough times, I appreciate Abbott and all the doctors who are participating in this for this academic program. But what I wanted to highlight 2020 is also important from left main angioplasty data point of view, because we have now the 5-year Excel study data and also 10-year long-term data of Syntax. We are all surgeons used to be criticizing the long-term data comes, we'll know, but I will shed light and throw, and all of us who interventional cardiologists will be more happy with this data which I'll be presenting. And happy to present Apollo Group of Hospitals, where presently I'm trying to coordinate and work across with various Apollo Group. I'm also very proud to present my FACS professional colleagues mentioned here. We run services in multiple hospitals. Dr. Gambhir sir, I'd also like to mention that all of our colleagues are also logged in this, and they're very eager to hear you. Not to me, of course, because we keep talking. Thanks again, and all of us were enthusiastic to listen to him. And then in the coming 20-25 minutes, what I would do is I'll briefly introduce about left main disease. We know about it, and take you through the evolution of left main management. How the first surgery was proven superior to medical, then again coming on to present evidences of PCI. As I've been told in the introduction, that a new data of long-term follow-up study of 5 years and 10 years has come up. So I will touch upon those and take you through. And then fortunate also to collect NIC data of left main interventions. I briefly show some few slides about that to show the Indian data point of view and also how imaging is being performed in our Indian subgroup. And if time permits, I think I will show one or two examples. More of it will be shown by Dr. Gambhir in his technical approaches and conclude. And in this platform, I will also take this opportunity to share some happy news which happened in Apollo, because I consider all of us as one family, and that's how that will be planned. As you understand, left main coronary artery disease, why we are so much concerned about it is it's a small inch vessel, which is the most important vessel in the body. And if it gets occluded, patient can die suddenly. And if it's treated well, then it will have a lot of importance. Why is it so? Because it supplies a lot of area of myocardium. But until recently, only CABG was thought to be gold standard. And when we were students, when left main disease comes, I think it was already sent. This is the data which first showed that medical treatment compared to it, surgery showed very good results. This is the initial two studies of VA and European Heart Study showed that 5-year mortality compared to medical treatment is much, much better with surgery. And then patients survived longer, 20 months more compared to medical treatment. That's how this is way back in 70s. This data came in 90s. And then Andrews Gurenzik, this is also surprising to see the third PTCA of Andrews Gurenzik had angioplasty. And then, but this unfortunately, this patient died suddenly after 2 months. That's how this didn't pick up. In India, as we mentioned, Dr. Gambhir sir did in some young patient as a emergency procedure before. If you see the randomized control trial analysis of these 1,600 odd patients in these various trial subgroups which are shown here, this is initially only 1 year follow-up. Then if you see the death MI was not different and stroke was much less in PCI group. Repeat revascularization was slightly more as expected in the PCI arm. But if you see the left main subset of the taxes subgroup, then it showed that the left main group statistically were not different, and comparatively patients were doing all right. Yeah, and the lower tertiary and higher tertiary, again, this analysis came in the syntax. If you see it, deaths were not different, and though MIs were slightly more in the PCI arm, but strokes were less, and revascularization obviously was a problem, which is more, but overall MACE was not significantly different. That's how we gradually started thinking that probably in this subgroup of patients, we could do even PCI procedures effectively. But as what we know, the syntax score is one which makes it. If all the focal lesions are laid like this, we can take care with the angioplasty. But if a patient has very complicated left main and multiple occlusions, especially total occlusions, surgeon may not be bothered too much. He is bothered only of the distal grafting vessel. But we as angioplasty, we need to take care of it, and we are always wanting to do total revascularization. Higher the score, then probably more edge towards surgery will happen. If you see the low to intermediate risk group scores here, absolutely there's no difference in any of these parameters which are seen here. That's how 0 to 32, but only in higher syntax score, more than 33, again, surgery performed better. And but again, even in this subgroup, significantly, but for the revascularization process, rest of the data were not statistically significant. Lot of advances happened in PCI. We always used to think the syntax is done with the older generation of taxus stent. With the availability of newer, better stents like Zynes and other platforms, patient took better. We started doing radial procedures, and then we started taking help of image guidance, and we have better antiplatelet drugs. And then probably surgery also improved a little. Surgeons were also arguing. So that's how this Excel study is planned. With again initially seen to be 2,905 patients, but about 1,000 of them were excluded and 1,900 were selected for randomization between Zynes versus CABG. And these patients were studied too. And if you see, the baseline parameters were not different. And about a significant number of patients also had ACS and MI parameters. And diabetes was there in about 30% of the people. Age group was about 66, and only isolated left main was very few, 17%. Distal left main bifurcation, which we thought with discussion point, significantly 80% of them in the subgroup had a distal left main bifurcation stenosis. The idea was to take only low and intermediate tertiary patients. That's what the site selected. But when analysis was done in the core lab central, about 1/4 of them had a higher syntax score. So this is a point to be noted. Even in higher syntax score, then this data came out positive. So if you see this, initially it was analyzed for 3 years. The PCI initially fared better with less of death of strokes, and later on with around 3 years, again it fused up. And almost at this point of time, this data was presented in GCT and later published in NEJ. Then people said in 5 years, when it comes to, then it could cause more differences. But fortunately, the 5-year data also showed no significant difference in this combined endpoint of death, stroke, and MI. If you see various subgroups, again, people who have said various interactions we should try to analyze and see whether the presence of diabetes or not, it made no difference. Patients, whether he had left main bifurcation, also no difference. Left main or no left main, no difference. Syntax score, whatever types, is no different. So that is how it is. I think that I tried to see there's no difference. What we analyzed, if you see it, the early first 1 month pattern, the PCIs actually had much better results compared to CABG, whereas in between 1 month to 12 months, there's no difference. And the long term, again, it again equalized. If you see this, how the patients behaved, the earlier part, the first one year, actually was better with PCI. and gradually it fused and interpolated later. That's how the restricted mean survival analysis, if you see it, that's what is calculated here. Overall, the PCI subgroup had 5.2 days of a better quality of life and better event-free survival compared to surgery up to 5-year analysis. If you see, this is what I also learned new outcome at 30 days. If you see, there was significantly less of death, strokes, and periprocedural MIs problems with PCI compared to, and stent thrombosis because of better quality of stent with veins. Again, with graft failure, occlusions are happening very early. Again, this problems happened more in the CABG arm in the first 30 days. So if the adverse events, if again see, this is again surgeons and cardiologists together decided all these adverse events. I would say that probably all these events which would happen more with surgery obviously had to come significant more in favor of PCI, be it be like major bleedings, transfusions, arrhythmias, renal failure, sternal wound deficits. Obviously, they would happen only with surgery. That's how these adverse events also were more initially. If you see the primary endpoint at 5 years, death, stroke, and MI, this is very heartening. At 5 years also were not significantly different. And there a lot of people argued initially that revascularization repeat, which was again Achilles heel when PCI was not included in the analysis, then that also was analyzed in this 5-year data by Stone and others. Then again, very minimal, about 6% difference came in between the two. So, but all-cause deaths, if you see, the deaths were slightly more happening in the later part. When they tried to analyze what did happen, the cardiovascular deaths did not differ. But if you see, the non-cardiovascular deaths somehow became slightly more in the CABG, in the PCI arm in the long term. If they try to see why it has happened, what are the causes of non-cardiovascular causes of death in the PCI arm, it is malignancy and sepsis somehow have happened later, whereas strokes happened more in bypass. Fortunately, overall, it didn't matter much in the difference in the various subgroups. So repeat revascularizations also I mentioned very minimal differences. If you see the angina relief score again, more PCI immediately produced more relief of angina. And the first 1 month, actually, some of these patients have pain and other things. The quality of life was not much better. Later on, overall, both were same. Angina free equivalence also, it is initial periods PCI scored better. Later on, it was same. Thus, to conclude, 5-year mortality in Excel was almost same, but with minimal of a 3% difference, which is happening because of other reasons too. When it was analyzed and patient preferences were analyzed, this is again, I borrowed some of the slides from Dr. Greg Stone. What they've analyzed separately from these patient preferences of multivessel PCI versus CABG, most of the patients preferred PCI over CABG, even if the mortality was twice compared to CABG, which is not so. So this is patient's point of view. Then that's how we came to know that PCI is doing better in the long term, even in the other things are observed. It's observed little difference in mortality again, more happened because of non-cardiovascular causes, not with the cardiovascular causes. Then if you see how to see the death endpoint is happening with a very small, minuscule number of patients. So to get more information, all this data with meta-analysis randomized was taken. And if you see it, most of it was always not much significant. And in fact, if some of these trials came slightly favoring, see the long-term mortality of these trials after 5 years, all these red and blue graphs, which are both PCI and CABG, almost are overlapping each other. And that's how there's not much of difference. This is very important. Again, I want you to concentrate. Syntax, 10-year mortality, if you see, again, in fact, the PCI had slightly less, though it's not statistically significant. All-cause death was much less here. And if you see pre-CAMBAT, this was just presented in a recent virtual ACC conference, how we are doing now virtual webinar. They did it, and the 10-year data, which is though with a cipher type of stents was presented, again, the mortality was not different. So if you try to see what is the physician's point, we're always worried about deaths. But if you try to ask the patient, patients are more worried about strokes and repeat myocardial infarctions, so which happened more with CABG. In other words, to say, patient's preference point of view, if you see, always PCI could be preferred. Then updated other 30-day strokes, as we mentioned, definitely only this Noble trial is the one which had slightly, for various other reasons, had more strokes in the PCI arm. But if you remove the Noble trial, again, it much 39% lower incidence of strokes was noted. If you see the other reasons for it, but for this small trial, most of it was favoring the PCI arm. And if Noble was removed, as I mentioned, the risk reduction was very significant. There was less of 42% reduction in the strokes with PCI arm. If you see all myocardial infarctions, both procedural and non-procedural, again, significantly, the less of events happen in the PCI arm. And later on, if you see on the long-term follow-up after 3 years, some of myocardial infarctions also were noted little more in the PCI arm compared to surgery, because they said that they all treat the entire disease, whereas we treat stent is done locally for the disease. So thus, for all of you to understand this, the concept PCI has very early advantages. First, patient has to be fine to get discharged from the hospital. Later on, we'll look for other long-term benefits. If you see the early advantages, less invasive, few periprocedural complications, less of bleeding, less of AKI, lower of a 30-day MACE, and more rapid recovery. It is a quality of life and the relief of angina has much happened very earlier compared to CABG, whereas CABG has later long-term more durable events and less of events after 1 year. So particularly if you think of about repeat revascularization procedures. Thus, PCI and CABG are both here to stay and no significant differences, especially even in the long-term data. Initially, we thought about 5 years with Excel and 10 years with Syntax and Combat data. So thus, each of us should decide well, and such sort of things could happen. That's about the data. I thought I would show you. I was fortunate to collect this data on behalf of NIC and presented in Lucknow. Some of you have seen Dr. Gambhir sir was also there. In the 2018 of coronary interventions, we did about 4,38,351 coronary interventions, out of which I think left main angioplasties contributed 2.3%. Even if it is 2.3%, this is the beauty of our country. It constitutes about 10,000 plus left main interventions. And if you see the bifurcation, we had about 3,549. This is what is reported. About 35% of them were bifurcations. And the intravascular ultrasound, and maybe it is IVUS or OCT usage, it was there in about 28% of patients of these left main interventions. Surprisingly, the other thing I also noted is many of these patients who come with acute MI also had left main diseases because of maybe thrombus and other things, which was presentation with a left main was also seen in some of these patients. This is about Indian data which you connected. This is what I was highlighting. The IVUS usage also slightly going up, OCT usage also going up. And before I conclude in the last 5 minutes, I would like to take this opportunity to show one or two cases which we did. Fortunate enough to do this live case transmission to TCT. See that very critical tight stenosis. Later on, if I see sit with colleagues, I see how did we select this. But fortunately, everything went well. He's a 65-year-old male presented with unstable angina, risk factors of diabetes, dyslipidemia, and hypertension. Then, as said before, he didn't want surgery. He also had some COPD issues. That sort of very critical tight distal left main he had. And then if you see it in this again, this view, RCA, though it had mild PDA disease. So we initially did all this in live. LCX could be wired easily, but LAD and the eccentricity of plaque, we had some slight issue, but also with little manipulations we could wire. Once the both were wired, we became little more confident, and then took a small balloon because we were worried whether OCT catheter couldn't go because of such tight lesions. So they elected with a small balloon here, and then took the OCT. The idea of doing imaging was to see the involvement of left L6 ostium. Then that was the picture. To avoid the more loss of time, I directly freed some of these frames. That is the tightest point of LAD to left main. Ostium of LCX looked okay from the LAD point of view. The proximal left main was good sized vessel, a long vessel if you see. The lesion length also we could directly measure. And then that's how we can calculate exactly and do it. But we wanted to make it absolutely sure while discussing also LCX also we wanted to again image separately through LCX. The OCT imaging happened through LCX. And this is the tightest point here. And if you see the ostium, again, of L6 was quite okay at junction. So then we became more confident. And after the discussion, we thought we could do a crossover type of stenting. And we took a longer stent to cover the entire thing. And because ostium was free from disease, we didn't come up to the ostium. But we inflated with a thing, then gave little nitro. The procedure flow was very good. But we did this proximal optimization with part with higher sized balloon. I'm skipping it fast because sir would show more interesting, more definitely better cases. And the LCX ostium, if it is looking eccentric here, but again, if you watched it closely, the lesion point of view, it did not look tight, very important. We wanted to make sure this is a 3D stent. After stenting in LAD, again run through stent rendering, which showed it, and the 3D fly view, and which was all. This is what I was very impressed. how the bifurcation view shows the LCX osteum very clearly, though there are some struts better that you should not have. Then later on, we thought FFR of LCX should be done. And if it is not important, then we need not do anything to LCX. And as we expected, LCX baseline was 0.97, post FFR came 0.88. That's how we left it to the crossover stenting. And patient came for follow-up too also, and he's doing quite well. So we need not go just by angiographic appearance, but if flow is good and FFR comes negative, we thought we can leave it and patient is doing fine. This is what is the final picture. This is the final picture. Other case which we did in live is not relevant to our meeting today. So multi-vessel PCI, but I just wanted to show this, highlight this newer technology of QFR, which is coming up in the multi-vessel PCI in place of FFR. We showed it well. That is about other things. The provisional stenting pattern works overall like what it is shown. But if both vessels are important, I think sir will tell more details about it. I'd skip. I'd just show the case example. And this is another 69-year-old male patient, diabetic, hypertensive, hyperlipidemia. And he also had a degenerative aortic valve disease post bioplastic valve replacement in Narayana Hrudayalaya in 2009. Now he had severe aortic stenosis and initially had fast rate with ischemic LVF. We stabilized. We thought everything could happen only because of aortic stenosis. And as a TAVI protocol, we did CT angio, did angio too. Then this patient had a very tight disease here, as seen in this angio. Then if you see that LCX osteum is very tight, this is more, though LAD had disease, unlike the previous thing, he has the tight LAD disease too here. And then we again discussed with patient because he needs revascularization for these two, whether you go for surgical AVR and the CABG, but patient refused. So that's how we explained him everything and wired both, and we initially predilated. I think I'm always worried. I think we'll hear more from Dr. Gambhir. Sir, LCX osteum is a little difficult animal for us to conquer, but here we try to do what is possible. Then after doing it with the 2.58 stent there, we again did a proximal stent crush there. Dilated again with 2.75. This is the first case. Then we took a longer stent now to cover into the LAD. We can have some discussion about the cases too in the discussion point. I'm skipping through because that is waiting. And then we rewired the LCX. Then again did a second case. That's the final result. We're very happy with the result. And after 6 weeks, this is the final result which we happened. We also did OCT. I think I have those pictures. This is a post-dilatation with a pot again with a bigger size balloon. This is the OCT picture. That is the angiographic final picture. OCT, again, for the sake of time, not going to full run of this. Distal to the stent segment, again, it was there is no dissection. And the osteum of LCX, again, we were concerned, is again free from disease. And the stent struts were also opposed very well there without any gap. And left main segment also area, we got 12.6 plus. And approximate to the left main, again, which was good without any dissections. That's how we confirmed everything. OCT was dead. And after 6 weeks, we did a TAVR procedure with Medtronic valve, self-expanding valve. And recently, this patient stays somewhere near Bangalore, but this online consultations in this COVID era is teaching us something new. We recently, in the 14th May, we did online. That was patient was always talking in Telugu, telling that all the drugs he's taking and is doing fine. I'm doing fine with this. And that's how the report goes and generates and given to patient. Why we all of us struggle, and Dr. Gambhir started doing this, and we all of us work more hard in spite of all the technical challenges in left main, is because we don't want our patients to suffer like this in ICUs. Though it is a must, we can do it. All our PCI patients can enjoy this next day. But if again, when we ask, most of the patients do not want surgery, but we need to have a proper discussion, heart team concept discussion, and try to do what is good for the patients. This is the current guidelines. If you see earlier 2010, 11, 14, where it was there as a class 2 indication. Now with the latest 2018 guidelines, it's become less than 0 to 22. It is a class 1 indication for PCI. And then for in-between scores is class 2A. And the bifurcation is where the challenge. Again, it still has a class 3. But again, if you can do a good job, and especially after the heart team discussion with more technical expertise, which Dr. Gambhir sir will be sharing, I think patients will have even good results even there. So what is recommended? We need to have a heart team collaborative approach, and both CABG and PCI could be offered, especially if the patient has syntax score of less than 32, there's no problem. More than 33, we need to be careful, and probably taking the help of imaging and do a proper job, and which you should see more when with technique description in cases from Dr. Gambhir sir. With this, I think I thought I would share this happy news with you, and I'm also happy to say that Apollo was recently news because one day we did 5 TAVR procedures. Thanks to Sushil and others who have helped in this, and not many centers could achieve this figure. But unfortunately, with this COVID, we have some cases, but we're stuck there at half century. And some of these, and most of the procedures were done uneventful. But for one patient who had some non-procedure related death on day 5, 2 patients only required permanent pacemaker implantations. With this, I would mostly this TCT this year would be virtual TCT. I request all of you to block your these days, and thank you again for patient hearing. Let us hear more from Dr. Gambhir regarding the techniques of these cases. Thank you once again. Hello, can you switch on to Dr. Gambhir?
Thank you, Dr. Srinivas.
I'll stop sharing.
Yeah.
Hello, sir?
Yeah, I'm just going.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thanks once again, Dr. Srinivas, and welcome to all the participants, with the belief that many of you who are there in the audience are doing regularly the left main coronary intervention. It will be very interesting to share with you that I've been doing left main intervention since the year 1996, and I'll show you my first case. And 25 years down the line, I think I must have participated in almost about 8 to 10 debates, PCI versus CABG, particularly in the era of drug-eluting stents. And I must compliment Dr. Srinivas, who has very elegantly put forward before you and highlighted that PCI and coronary artery bypass graft surgery, a point of contention between the interventional cardiologists and the surgeons, and particularly on the long-term follow-up, has now been resolved with the publication of 2 very landmark trials, the Syntex, where we have 10 years follow-up, and a pre-combat, which has only recently been released, the 10-year follow-up. And both of these trials have clearly shown that there is no significant difference in the mortality between the 2 modalities of treatment. I think so that takes away or pushes the pendulum towards coronary intervention. Of course, in a selected group of patients of left main coronary artery disease, I wouldn't say that everyone is fit enough to go undergo a PCI, but in vast majority of the cases, you can do it. Now, the purpose for which I'm here is to show you some very interesting cases of application and how I do it or how I treat it. Well, Dr. Srinivas has already said that when Dr. Andrea Brunswick performed his first 50 cases, out of which 5 had left main coronary artery disease. But unfortunately, 3 of these patients, 5 out of these 5 patients, 3 died. So when he presented his paper, he said, we have not been too successful in dilating left main coronary stem, although the procedure is relatively simple, but the potential complications are both serious and sudden. So he said categorically that left main stenosis is definitely a contraindication for balloon angioplasty, and of course that was the era of balloon angioplasty. But then, with the advances in technique, the experience of the interventional cardiologists, the availability of better antiplatelet agents, and most importantly, with the turn of millennium, the availability of the drug-eluting stents has shifted the pendulum once again towards coronary intervention. Now, this is my first case, which was done in a young 36 or 37 years pregnant woman who had presented to us with the repeated episodes of syncopal attacks. And she had an angiogram done outside another hospital because after all the neurological examination turned out to be negative. So some intelligent cardiologist started doing angiogram, and he found that she has a critical left main coronary artery osteostenosis, and therefore he referred the patient to us. Now, at that time, I was also very new. I didn't know, and after a lot of struggle, discussions, yes, no, finally we undertook this patient for angioplasty. And this was my first case, which was, of course, done under a partial cardiopulmonary support system. And the result was excellent, and patient survived thereafter for 10 years of my follow-up. But then she subsequently developed other problems like arthritis, and then I don't know what happened to her later. This was the second case, of course, one of those, not the second case, but in the same, after a couple of months, another gentleman who came to us with unstable angina, and he had a critical, a very eccentric, highly eccentric stenosis in the body of the left main, and this was treated by directional coronary, and I am proud to say that we were the pioneers in directional coronary at that time, and this was a straightforward case for DCA. So we did DCA in this patient, and then put in a bare metal stent, and then patient survived for 20 years after that, and finally died of coronary cause. So in ostial and shaft stenosis, there is no doubt that the in-hospital mortality is nil, and restenosis at 6 months is very low, and need for repeat interventions also extremely low. So certainly it is an effective alternative and even better as compared to coronary artery bypass graft surgery. But the problem starts here. What about DES for distal left main bifurcation stenosis? Well, that's a real challenge, as has been pointed out. The distal left main bifurcation stenosis comprise almost about 2/3 of all cases of left main coronary artery stenosis. Technically highly challenging, and I would say that one should not even start doing left main bifurcation unless he has done first 20-25 cases in the body or simple single stent technique. Whenever possible, a single stent strategy should be performed because of fewer adverse outcomes compared to the two stent technique. So when do we use two stent technique? It is required when there is a distal left main bifurcation stenosis, as you can see in this case, with significant stenosis which is extending into both the LAD and circumflex. There is a large side circumflex with significant area of distribution of the circumflex, let's say dominant circumflex or a lot of obtuse marginal branches. But you cannot afford to lose this kind of circumflex, so therefore a two-stent strategy is recommended right from the word go. And loss of such circumflex could result in fatal complications or a serious hemodynamic compromise. Now, before you undertake a left main bifurcation stenosis, it's very important and pertinent for an interventional cardiologist to have a very closer look at the angiogram and see what type of left main coronary artery stenosis the patient is having, because all LMCA distal bifurcation stenosis are not the same. So therefore, the technique and the type of stents and imaging technologies all will depend upon what kind of a left main you are dealing with. Now here is the example of a short left main with a significant stenosis which involves the ostium of the LAD, circumflex ramus, and there is a shallow bifurcation angle. So you have to look at the bifurcation angle, size of the left main, size of the LAD, and size of the circumflex. Here is another example. This is not a classical left main, but you see a long left main, a tight stenosis at the ostium of the LAD, but circumflex stenosis is very close to the ostium. So again, you would have to stent either the left main to LAD and then stent the circumflex, or you would have to treat it like a left main bifurcation. And the angle is very wide, more than 70 degrees. This is the third case which has got a bifurcation angle, again a significant left main distal bifurcation, which is extending into both the LAD and circumflex, a dominant circumflex, and a bifurcation angle which is very wide, approximately 90 degrees. And here is a large size LMCA, but short in length. And again, a large size LAD and circumflex is a bifurcation angle which is very wide, more than 70-80 degrees. This is a case of a left main trifurcation. You see a left main which is itself not very involved, maybe disease, but you see that all the major branches coming from LMCA is LED, ramus or a early diagonal, and the circumflex going into OM, all are having a critical stenosis. So it's basically a left main trifurcation disease. So when you have analyzed, in order to get excellent outcome, it's very important to follow these four major principles when you treat a left main bifurcation stenosis. One is the appropriate selection of the technique. And I'm going to talk only of two-stent strategies and what two-stent strategies, and then you must, during the procedure, all the three major steps, that is post-stent high pressure balloon dilatation, kissing balloon inflation, and pot and a repot, all are important at different stages in the techniques or various techniques of left main bifurcation stenosis. None of these steps should be ignored, and missing of any of these steps or not doing any one of these steps can lead to a serious consequences in the form of stent thrombosis. Imaging modalities, as far as possible, should be used, whether you use a OCT or a IOS before procedure, during procedure, and post procedure, particularly before procedure and after procedure. Well, I wouldn't say it is mandatory, but it is desirable to get a good result. And the drug-eluting stents must be used. There is not a place for bare metal stents in left main bifurcation stenosis. When you decide about which two-stent technique, which I will not go into the details, these are the three major things one has to look into: the relative size of LMCA, LAD, and LCX branches, the angle of bifurcation, which, as I've shown you in various angiograms, that the angle may be less than 70 or more than 70, because the technique depends on this angulation of bifurcation, and the presence of significant stenosis in the distal branches. Here is a rough schematic diagram which tells you how you select a technique, but I would again emphasize that it is not mandatory that you should follow precisely this flow diagram. A lot would depend upon the technique, the expertise of an interventional cardiologist for a particular technique. And now, of course, 2 or 3 techniques are well standardized, so I think one should start based upon these basic guidelines. One should select a technique. Now, what are those guidelines? One should look at the discrepancy in the diameter of the LAD and LCX, and if the combined size of the LAD and LCX diameter is more than 2/3 of the diameter of the LMCA. That means the LAD and LCX are big, and LMCA is not big enough to accommodate 2 stents. Then you look at the bifurcation angle. Now, if the bifurcation angle is approximately less than 70, and the best view to see would be a spider view, a leopardal view. And if it is less than 70, I think the ideal technique would be a mini crush technique. But if the angle of bifurcation is more than 70, 80, 90, or a wide apart, then possibly the tap technique is a good technique, T-stenting or tap technique. But in contrast to the previous one, if the size of the LAD and LCX combined together is less than 2/3 of the size of the LMCA, that means the LMCA is not big enough to accommodate 2 stents. Then it is important to again look at the angle. If it is less than 70 degree, then you can use the SKS technique, but if it is more than 70, again go for a tap technique. So this is in general the guidelines which are recommended for a selection of the technique. And I'm sure all of you who are doing these techniques must be all familiar to you how to do the V-stenting, culotte technique. But what I follow in most of the cases is either a tap technique for the left main, but most commonly I use is a DK crush, sometimes mini crush, sometimes even a SKS technique or a V-stenting. I rarely use a culotte technique because I'm not very convinced that one could leave a lot of metal in the left main. But yes, in some cases I do it. Now, this is my experience over the last 15 years plus. I have done 570 cases till the end of December 2019, and to this we can add another 30 odd cases by now. The Distribution was distal bifurcation were almost 2/3, 1/3 were ostial or shaft or a total. And elective left main bifurcation stenting was done in 95. Elective stenting of the intervention was done in 95, and 5% were emergency bifurcation stenting. Single stent technique was used in nearly 1/3, two stent technique in 70% of these cases, and trifurcation stenting was done in 13 of these 570 cases. Angiographic success was very good, 98%. In hospital complications, particularly deaths, occurred in 6 patients, MI in 1, and reintervention was required in 3 cases. I'll give up the follow-up at this point. It's not important because you can very well understand. But we had a very small follow-up out of these patients. Almost 400 have been followed up regularly, and the MACE rate was almost about 13%. Now let me show you the examples. I'll take up these 3 or 4 important groups. First of all, acute myocardial infarction with cardiogenic shock. And as you know that the commonest cause of acute occlusion of the left main coronary artery continues to be atherothrombotic, and this accounts for 2 to 4% of STEMI patients. Where there are other causes like catheter-induced occlusive dissection, spontaneous dissection, or intense spasm of the left main coronary artery. Now, case number 1 is this is a case of a primary PCI in a left main occlusion. Used and treated by a reverse T stenting, and this was done almost about 10 or 11 years ago. This is a 45 years young male. The important point in the history is that he had a stenting done of proximal LAD almost 4 years before this presentation. That means in 2006. He stopped all his medications, and this was 4 years after he has undergone a stenting of the LAD. He presented with extensive interval MI. EF was 35%. He was rushed to the CCU. He was very restless, developed VT, cardioverted, put on ventilatory support. BP was 50 to 60, on inotropic support. Heart rate was 140, and he was rushed to the cath lab. And this was his angiogram. This was performed on a ventilatory support. You can see here there was a thrombotic occlusion of the LMCA with visible previous stent in the LAD. You can see that stent in the LAD, and this was Johnson & Johnson Cyclo stent. And there is a holdup of contrast in the LCX also. So the first point to be highlighted here is that in such cases, you should first, because we knew that this patient had LAD and possibility of instant thrombosis with a possibly instant restenosis with a superadded thrombosis is very high, which has extended into left main. So in such cases, you should first try to salvage the vessel which is likely to be patent. So we thought that circumflex was a patent vessel, should be a patent vessel. So we initially pushed the wire, and it fortunately went into circumflex without any problem. And since we did try for a minute or so to get our wire into the LAD, but we were unable since there was a stent in the LAD. So we immediately did a thrombosuction of the clot, which was lying from left main and going into the circumflex also. And just thrombosuction restored the flow into the LCX. And the flow was TB3, the patient's blood pressure started improving immediately. But then, as we are fiddling to get the wire into the LAD, the patient again started having hypotension, and we realized I'm missing some of these or not showing all the steps. So the LCX again started occluding, and so we then stented the LCX. So we thought, let us at least restore the LCX, and that has shown us clearly that restoration of flow in the LCX would lead to restoration of the blood pressure. So now we were a little on the safer side, so we now wired the LAD, which took some 3-4 minutes. And after this, we did a thrombosuction of the LAD, and this was after thrombosuction. And then we deployed a stent. Second DES was deployed from left main to LAD, overlapping the stent which was made to protrude a little bit into the left main. So I call it a reverse T stenting. This led to restoration of TB3 flow in both the LAD and circumflex. So this is the final result after the kissing balloon dilatation. And then this was after 4 weeks of follow-up. Patient was extubated and he did very well on after 48 hours. He was sent home, was called back after 4 weeks when we did a re-angiogram and it looked all very bright. This is the second case which I'm going to show you on a different strategy. So earlier was a reverse T stenting. Now you have got another situation. This is again a young man, 52 years, presented with STEMI with a window period of 2 hours, blood pressure of 80, and he had early onset of blood ventricular failure. EC showed extensive entry of all MI, echo showed ejection fraction of 30%. And this was the angiogram. He had again a high-grade 80% eccentric stenosis at the distal LMCA, which went into the LAD ostium, and the LAD ostium, near its ostium, I would say osteoproximal, there was 100% occlusion, which led on to his developing anterior wall MI. But then the circumflex is also having a tight stenosis at its origin, and then of course other obtuse marginal branches, etc. Right coronary artery was okay. So now this is a kind of again an emergency situation, but not as emergency as in the first case. But at the same time, one has to keep it in mind that one cannot now here use techniques where you are not having an access to both the branches at all the time during the procedure, because here his life was to some extent being saved only by circumflex, and that too was having a high-grade stenosis, including the distal left main. So we wired both the branches without any problem, and then we thought the best technique, which would be very quick, safe, and would restore the flow in both the vessels, would be SKS technique. Although I don't like SKS, but in such situations, yes, you can see the SKS 2 stents were deployed at the same time, and after the SKS, this was the final result, and all of this took not more than 20 minutes or so, and the patient's BP was restored, and he did very well. Now, this is case number 3 on acute, again, MI with shock. This patient came to us, he's again a young man who came to us with very middle-aged man, 63 years, and he came to us with acute chest pain, which was classical of coronary, but we were surprised at the ECG. He had very subtle changes, STT changes in lead 1, AVR, V5, V6. So we were thinking that he may be having possibly an obtuse marginal or a circumflex, and there was only a posterior volular hypokinesia. So we took him up for an angiogram, and this was the angiogram. Now you can see here that there is a mild distal left main, not very significant, but LAD osteoproximal is about 60 to 70% moderate stenosis. LCX osteal is about 90%. And then there is a large size OM, which has also got a significant stenosis. So here we were treating a situation where we had to possibly save all the 3 important vessels. So we wired all the 3 major arteries, and then we first deployed a stent from LMCA to LCX, protruding a little bit into the left main, so that we take care of the, and at this point in time, we kept a balloon parked in the LAD. Can you see that the balloon has been parked? So that in case the stent is protruding too much into the left main, we are able to crush that part of the protruding stent with the balloon, and then can push a second stent into the LAD. So this is always an important step which must be remembered. So then having done that, we kept the wire in the LAD and then recrossed the obtuse marginal now through the struts or towards the cell of the L6 stent, and put a second stent into the obtuse marginal branch, and using a tap technique. Now you can see, and on your right hand side, you can see that after TAC we did a kissing balloon dilatation. And then after that, we put a stent from left main to LAD, overlapping the L6 origin and crushing a little bit of the L6 stent. And this was a reverse T once again. And after this, of course, we did not do a triple or a simultaneous kissing double or triple balloon because of a patient had acute MI. So we left it at that stage. The result was very acceptable. Now this is a patient again with extensive all MI with hypotension, and we had to do a left main bifurcation stenting. He's a young man, 37 years, chest pain of 2 hours duration, BP again of 80 millimeters of mercury, saturation 95%, extensive interval MI, ejection fraction 30%. And sorry, this was his right coronary artery was normal, and this was his left main. So very scary that he had a LED 100% occluded. There's a flush occlusion, so very difficult to negotiate a wire into this because you can even perforate the left main. There is a thrombus which is extending into the circumflex with what degree of stenosis is difficult to assess at this point of time, but it seems that there is some stenosis at the original circumflex also. So we first wired the circumflex, as I've been telling repeatedly. It was you would be wasting time in wiring this LED, which will be very difficult. So we wired the circumflex and did a thrombosection of the circumflex. Having done that, now you can see here that on your left-hand side, after thrombosection, can possibly we could visualize the origin of the LED, but there was a lot of assumption in that. So having done that, through that assumption of LED ostium, we wired the LED, and having wired the LED, we did a thrombosection even the LED, keeping the wire in the circumflex and also the fused marginal branches. And then we first stented the circumflex from left main to LCX, and then we deployed through the LMCA to LED stent using the tap technique. We deployed a stent into the LED ostium, and then did a kissing balloon and pot, etc. Everything was done. And this was the result after all those kissing balloon pot, excellent result, with almost TIMI3 flow with some thrombus which has migrated into the distal part of the LED. Next is a patient where we had to emergency LMC bifurcation stenting while he was undergoing a coronary angiography. Now this is a lady, 65 years. She had come to us with rest angina of recent onset. So we took her up. She was having a normal LV. ECG was normal. So we took her up for an angiogram. And soon after the angiogram, which I'll show you, very scary. Now this is a guiding catcher. So after the angiogram, while we were discussing in the control room with the family, patients, our technician came out running that patient is having severe chest pain, a lot of ventricular ectopics, non-sustained VTs, and her blood pressure is falling. So we rushed back, immediately took a consent, rushed back into the lab, and then passed a guiding catheter and wired both the branches. And you can see in your right-hand side, Sine, that even the flow has become very sluggish. So we wired both the branches, and then, of course, in this case, we use the mini crush technique. We placed 2 DES, and in the mini crush, which I'm sure all of you know that one stent is proximal markers is really proximal to the other stent. So here LED was first we stented the LED, and then after that we stented the circumflex, crushing the protruding part of the LED stent and final kissing balloon dilatation. And this was the excellent result. And all this was performed over a period of 15 minutes or so, and patient could be saved from going into a fatal endpoint. So this is just the literature. We have very limited data of PCI in left main occlusion. I'll not bore you with this, but just suffice you to show you 2 slides. Well, if you look at 30-day all-cause mortality, this is an average result of 13 series in patients who have got an acute occlusion of the left main coronary artery and present to you in different formats like cardiogenic shock, VT, and etc. etc. Now the overall mortality is different when the patient is presenting with cardiogenic shock versus when he is not in shock. The mortality is almost 5 times higher if the patient presents with LMC occlusion with cardiogenic shock as compared to the point if he is not in cardiogenic shock. If you look at the long-term data which has just been published in the International Journal of Cardiology, they have taken 601 patients, out of which 45 had isolated left main coronary artery occlusion with cardiogenic shock, and compared them with non-LMCA, and they found that all the endpoints in hospital mortality, 30-day outcome, 1-year outcome, long-term mortality, they were all significantly higher in patients who had a isolated LMCA occlusion with cardiac shock as compared to those who had a non-LMCA. And if you see that even 9 years follow-up, the mortality is 80%. So one can imagine, but then this is the only modality of treatment available to you because surgeon would not take a patient like this. So the take-home message is hemodynamic and electrical instability are the most important challenges in such cases. Speedy action, onset support of anesthetics is highly important. IABP may be inserted if required. Strategy of stenting should be decided only after thrombosection and visualizing both the vessels. Liberal use of GP2B3, but that of course now we have very potent oral antiplatelet agents. PCI strategy to be kept as simple as possible. Two-stent strategy may be required in some cases. Rotablation may be considered, and I'll show you a case of rota now. This is a patient who had come to us with acute anterior wall MI in the middle of the night and was again diabetic for the last 20 years, hypertensive, chest pain, and you can see here that he has got a RBB and left anterior passive block with markedly elevated ST segment and a ventricular topic. He had undergone previously a dual chamber pacemaker in some other hospital about 8 years ago. Now this was the coronary angiogram. You can see the right is totally gone. Left is also very badly diseased. LAD is 100% occluded. There is hardly any flow. And LCH distally seems to be diffusely diseased with blocking in the obtuse marginal branch. So we wired this LAD and did serial balloon dilatation or several balloon dilatations. And after this several balloon dilatations, this was the result. Some flow could be obtained in the LAD, but highly calcified LAD. So at this point in time, I thought that we will not be able to proceed further unless we do a debulking in this patient. So this was in the night. We immediately changed our strategy to rotablation there and then, paused the rota wire and then did a rotablation of this 1.25 millibar. And following that, they did a stenting, and there was some haziness at the unfortunately this child is missing somewhere. And there was haziness at the original circumflex. We did a IVUS here, and we found that there was some plaque at the distal end of the left main and haziness with some plaque at the original circumflex. It's got tired now. Yeah, you can see it. Tired. Let me give us a pause for a half a minute. Yeah. So this is the final result after doing we had to do a bifurcation stenting. We first stented the LAD, and then since there was there was a haziness at the original circumflex with some disease. So we you can see here that we deployed 2 stents first in the LAD and then left main to L6, and the patient had excellent result. Now, if we look at the literature, in patients who have got a MI and requiring a rotablation, there are only 47 cases reported, and the median duration of MI and rotablation was 4 days. There is hardly any case of a rotablation done during the acute phase of myocardial infarction, and 7 at STEMI, and again the duration was a little later. It was after some hours that this STEMI patient underwent a rotablation, and most of these were non-STEMI. MACE was at 30 days was quite pretty high, and death was about 13%. So, but the point which needs to be emphasized is that rotablation acute MI is feasible, effective, high success rate in experienced hands, but it should be performed only in patients who have got a highly calcific stenosis with STEMI after adequate thrombosection, and may be considered as a rescue therapy in infarcted artery with balloon, undilatable and uncrossable lesion. Now I'll show you one highly calcific left main bifurcation stenosis. A patient who was refused even CABG. This is a calcific distal left main high-grade stenosis with diffusely diseased circumflex artery. This patient is 66 years. He had a CA glottis, operated, tracheostomy done, and he landed in our emergency room on one winter night with class 4 angina LVF. Echo showed a ejection fraction of 35%. Not working, भैया. Same problem.
Click on that button, sir. Huh?
Can you go back and log in once again? I think we log in once again, and I'll just take half a minute. Need to escape. Restart the program.
Computer also is exhausted with too many complicated cases, sir.
Yeah, the computer is also exhausted. You are right. Yeah, this was the case, but I go to full screen. Full screen. Yeah. Now you see this. It's very scary. Highly calcific left main, diffuse disease LAD, diffuse disease circumflex, but then the surgeon refused. So we took up the challenge, did a rota using 1.25 bar, 1.5 meter bar. And then we started putting in stents, distally 1 cent, and then another stent in obtuse myelal branch, and then we did a left main bifurcation stenting using a mini crush technique again.
Can you see the slides, sir? Because we're not able to see the slide and seeing you.
You're not able to see the
Slides, sir. We are able to see you, but the slides are not being projected.
Okay, just wait.
Yeah, now it has come.
Now, can you see it now?
Yes, it has come now.
Okay, this is the final kissing balloon inflation, and this is the result. But you can see that there is some dissection at the distal part of the LAD stent as well as in the obtuse myelin, which was very easy to tackle. So we put 1 cent in the distal part of the OM going through the mini crush, and then the LAD distal dissection was sealed with a balloon. By this time we had put 5 stents, and this is the final result. So excellent result. Patient did well for 3 years. After that, we don't know what happened to him. Now, lastly, I'll show you one case of instant restenosis. This is a rota stenting for left main bifurcation using DK crush for long instant restenosis. Now you can see that this patient had a distal left main extending onto the LAD. There is a long stent in the LAD starting from the ostium. Also, there is a stenosis at the origin of the circumflex. So here we have to treat this instant restenosis. So I always do a debulking in this patient. So this is a rota ablation of the LAD, rota ablation of the LCX, and also using 1.5 meter bar straight away. So this is the final result after stenting. I will not go into the various steps. So this was all treated by using a DK crush, which I am sure all of you know. Now, this is a case which had instant restenosis again, but done under ribose, which I think I can skip off. And I'll show you one more case, which is with OCT. Now, this is a left main bifurcation for instant restenosis using OCT. That's an interesting case to see. This was a 72 years old gentleman from Lucknow. This was, of course, I had prepared a case for the NIC meeting in Lucknow, and he belonged to Lucknow. I said, I'll do you live in Lucknow, but he was not willing. He said, I'll get it done over here. Now, this patient had earlier undergone angioplasty with us in 2007, where stents were put in LAD, diagonal, LCSOM2, and PDA. He came after this 5-6 years with angina exertion class 2, and this was his pre-PCI left cornea angiogram. You can see in your right hand side, there is a distal left main LED ostium, circumflex ostium. All are having significant stenosis. They are not very critical, but they are significant stenosis. So we did a rota in this patient first, 1.5 mm per. In fact, we did OCT first, but they had put the slide a little wrongly. This was 1.5 mm per now. So we did a OCT finding. There's a pullback from LED to LMCA, and you can see that there is a lot of intimal hyperplasia, which is mostly fibrous. There is no calcification I can see anywhere, but significant stenosis. And then the circumflex pullback was here. Sorry, we'll go into this. This is a pullback from circumflex. Again, there is a significant intimal hyperplasia. And then we did a rota, which I've shown you earlier. And then we went ahead and put DES first in the obtuse marginal branch. And then after that, we did a DK crush, which there are a little more steps in this. So I've shown some steps here for the benefit of. So we positioned a stent in the circumflex, but we parked a balloon in the proximal LED. And then we crushed the protruding part of the LC stent, which was protruding into the LMCA with a balloon which was parked in the LED. This is a classical first crush. And then we deployed a DES from LMCA to, I'm skipping still some of the steps of the GK crush. And then we deployed a stent DES from LMCA to LED. And then second casing was done using NC balloons. And then this was the result after. Now, the interesting point in this case was, see it very carefully, Dr. Srinivas, this for you also. There is some filling defect at the origin of the LED. So this was a little troubling to me. So we were not very sure what we were dealing with. So I can see there is some haziness, there is some filling defect at the origin of the LED. So we thought that there is a tissue prolapse or a stent fracture or a thrombus, or could it be anything else? So we did, did several balloon dilatation, but it continued to persist. So we then did again a OCT in this pullback, and I hope this OCT runs.
You can click on that arrow, sir. No.
It showed there was a prolapse of the tissue. When we took a pullback from the LED to LMGA, no, just close to the ostium of the LED, there was a prolapse of the tissue. So we had no other choice except to put another stent. So we now took another stent, having done already a DK crush. We took another stent, and you can see here that was parked from left main into LED, overlapping the stent which we had just deployed. So it's another layer of stent over there. It is overlapping one, the LCX stent, LCX to LMCA stent, and the other, it is the LED stent. So this was 3.5 to 12 millimeter. And then we did again a kissing. This is the third kissing here. We again recrossed the circumflex through the stent, and then that did again a kissing. And then did a pot with a 4.5 millimeter balloon. And now we again did a OCT pullback, is not running. The tissue prolapse had disappeared, and this was the final result. So this is now very acceptable. Final result after pulling out the wires. So this tells you how these technologies help us in really coming to this. The last case, which is just to run through, allotment trifurcation stenting using two techniques, SKS and TAP. A 66 years male, severe TVD. You can see here now in this, all the three major branches had critical stenosis. Of course, circumflex looks to be moderate stenosis here, not a very critical, but in some of the views it looks very tight. In fact, there are four branches, so we wired the three branches, LED, ramus, and circumflex. Having done that, we deployed, first of all, using SKS technique, we deployed stents in the LED and circumflex and jailed the guide wire which is going into the ramus. You can see it in your right hand side, that SKS with a wire which has been jailed there. This is the kissing balloon inflation after we deployed the stent in the LED LCX and the jail guide wire was now withdrawn before kissing balloon because we were a little scared that it may not get tracked. Having done that, we now wired the ramus branch through the circumflex stent, you can see here, and then took another stent and using a tap technique with a balloon in the circumflex, and the third stent, which is now in the OM or ramus, we use a tap technique, and you can see here another interesting thing for participants to note that there are two guiding casters. We took the second side of the groin, and then pushed one stent from that, and so that we now wanted to do a triple kissing. So here you can see that one guiding caster is going from here and the other guiding from the one groin, and then we are using a stent which is going from one guiding caster, and then there is a balloon in this, and then the LED wire is there. And then we did a triple kissing because one guiding will not take all the three balloons, and this is mandatory, which we have learned over a period of time, that in some of the earlier cases we did not do a triple kissing, but in this case we saw to it that we do a triple kissing, so we had to take two guiding casters. Having done that, and this is the result after triple vessel stenting. Wires are still in, and so now interesting thing, this patient then had a dissection here at the left main, because we had done a SKS, and this is one of the biggest problems of the SKS, that there could be a proximal end dissection. Now you cannot leave a dissection the LMCA. So we took another short stent here, and this was we deployed into the left main from the ostium, seeing to it that this stent does not enter into any one of the two stents which have been deployed earlier in the LMCA with SKS, because if the distal end of this stent enters into any one of the two stents, then it will lead to a distortion of the other stents. So we pulled out one wire, and on one wire we deployed the stent, aligning the distal part of this new stent with the proximal end of the double barrel. And this was deployed under high resolution fluoroscopy, and then this dissection got sealed, and now you can see that you are satisfied with the final result. This is the final result. So this is the outcome of left main trifurcation stenting, 20 patients, not very many series. Maze rate is 29.4%, TLR is 11.8. So I can skip this. So now to conclude my talk, it is feasible to perform PCI with stenting of LMCA bifurcation stenosis in complex cases like the one I have shown you, acute occlusion, calcific stenosis, and interstent stenosis with good result. Careful planning of this strategy is extremely important for favorable in-hospital outcome. Two-stent strategy is required in most cases to optimize the results and prevent acute hemodynamic compromise as a result of side branch occlusion. The selection of one of the several two-stent techniques depends upon the relative size of the LMCA, LAD, LCX, and bifurcation angle which I have shown. Imaging by OCT is extremely helpful in some of these cases. On-site availability of the anesthetist is very important, and that gives you a real lot of moral strength to perform these kind of complex cases, because the anesthetist is available, and if there is any mishap, he can immediately can come to your rescue. With that, I thank you very much for your kind patience.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for showing excellent cases. We congratulate you for all that, and you're known for it. And we had a feast of excellent cases and ably explained by your things, sir. We have a lot of questions also coming up. I request you to stay for another 10-15 minutes to take all the questions, if you don't mind, because the talks little exceeded. A lot of questions came in. And thank you once again, sir, for showing such excellent cases.
Oh, my pleasure. It's always a pleasure to work with you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. As you mentioned before, seeing Dr. Gambhir performing such complex cases tomorrow onwards, let us not decide straight to go on to such cases. As sir mentioned in the introductory remarks that we need to do little simpler type of cases with osteal and probably shaft cases before we go on to this complex bifurcation. That's very important. And second thing, as what sir has showed, in many of these Indian subsets, we do get acute MI is also presenting with this sort of left main involvements. And this sort of technique is useful. And there's no question of comparing it to surgery, sir. Many times people think that if it is left main and triple vessel disease, you send the patient for surgery. Acute MI surgery and patient in shock is no joke. By the time you arrange everything, patient will further worsen. And that's how I think we interventional cardiologists have a lot of happiness, at least in saving such sick patients, ably shown by a lot of good cases by Dr. Gambhir, sir. What is the comment, sir, in acute emergency situation sending for surgery? Many of them keep arguing, as the data also showed, first patient needs to survive and go to the hospital, then the other events will follow on the follow-up. Immediately itself, you can't get him out, then it's a problem. So I think this point...
I'd just like to make a point here about acute MI, and I think the entire purpose of understanding and starting doing left main, particularly bifurcation, and at least in the beginning left main bifurcation, simple cases, is to do it, because unless you are doing left main bifurcation stenting, you would not be able to do acute MI. And I can tell you, in acute MI, you are the savior. You will be able to save the patient, not anybody else. Surgeon will never take a patient of acute MI with LMC occlusion. It is you who will be able to save, if possible, not the surgeon. So therefore, and you can do it only if you are doing routinely LMC bifurcation stenosis. Therefore, always start doing it. At some stage, you have to learn. You start doing simple cases first, and then you can take challenge of doing LMC occlusion, because this is a life-saving procedure.
Yes. As again, sir mentioned, presence of anesthetist and other actually heart team. If you have other junior colleagues who can help you in, somebody can put in IABP, somebody can do help in the taking care of the patient goes a long way. I think all of us will be a little more comfortable and confident if you have a good heart team. And anesthetist presence also helps. That the ventilatory part and respiratory part of it is left to him, so that we can concentrate on the procedure and do a proper job. That's also a very important point which I mentioned. And because sir spoke long, I will take few questions from myself which are simple, and the complicated ones I will leave it to Dr. Gambhir, because some of them wanted to have your opinion, sir. Some simple things like DAPT and all, I'll just answer for a few minutes, and then probably more questions which are directed to you, you can take up in the end. Should we continue DAPT for more than 1 year in bifurcation lesions? If both aspirin and clopidogrel are resistant, in that case, can I use silastazole, ticagrelor, or prasugrel? This is another important point. I think we have enough data now, especially when you're doing complicated cases like left main, especially bifurcation. It's always preferable, unless contraindication, preferable to use a better antiplatelet drugs. I think sir would agree. If you are comfortable, patient has no contraindication, you can use prasugrel as well. But ticagrelor nowadays is somewhere in between with both efficacy and with less of bleeding. I think that is a preferred antiplatelet drug of choice today. But again, it's mandatory on our part to rule out any contraindications for bleeding, other things, before you take up patients for such high-risk complex procedures. I think that answers newer antiplatelet drugs are preferred. In COVID-19 cases, which antiplatelet is safe? I think there is no definite recommendation which has come out in COVID era like that, but whatever standard of practice which we are following, you should use it, especially in elderly people where you have a bleeding tendencies. You need to be careful. And what is more important is having a rapid onset of action. That's where I think ticagrelor course over others. But in long-term follow-up, if there's some issues, that's a different story. And statins, there is some guideline which came that acute MI in COVID types, because more involvement of liver abnormalities could happen. Less of dose of statin is what is recommended. There is no definite guideline which came with antiplatelets. Which is the preferred PCI or CABG in diabetic patients? That's what we have been discussing. I think all through the data, initially we thought that diabetes is totally no for PCI, but with availability of better quality stents and better antiplatelet drugs, we are wiser now that even if you do a good result, then patients could be also having good long-term results. If you analyze specific subgroup analysis of Excel, even the 5 years, the diabetes did not make much difference. So standard teaching, the diabetes is a big no for PCI. I think we should come out of it and with better quality stents. And if you do a good job, I think obviously if you don't do a good job in the immediate results, then long-term results also won't be good. I think that is the important point to be taken. Dr. Akhil from Lucknow wants to know from you, sir, what is your default bifurcation technique for distal bifurcation lesions? Obviously, as sir mentioned, depending upon the various types of lesions which is there in LCX, stenosis associated, and the size of the vessels, all that I think you will decide. I think you can answer it. He wants to know again from you, Dr. Akhil from Lucknow.
No, read out the question once again.
What is your default bifurcation technique for distal bifurcation lesions, he says. Default bifurcation technique.
Yeah, you see, in majority of the cases, I would, if I have to do electively and by default, I prefer a DK crush technique, majority of the cases. The second technique after the DK crush comes the tap technique. These are the two techniques which I use very often. In some of the cases where I am not very comfortable with DK crush or tap technique, then reverse stenting is the third technique. But by default, I think DK crush continues to remain the drug.
I think most of it, what you said, I totally agree, sir. But this simultaneous SKS type of techniques, which are popularized before by somebody, I think is no good, because now we have seen in the lab when the patient comes with restenosis, hell of a problem, even if you have used SKS before. I think that's why only in emergency situations where you don't find time, you have also shown like that. We don't use SKS as an elective now any longer.
Yeah, I think I'd like to add to that in fact I did present this case, one of the cases of in European Bifurcation Club meeting in 3 years ago, where we had after SKS instant restenosis of the left main. And another case which I did only very recently, SKS, where we had instant restenosis of the left main. And we had to convert this SKS and convert the double barrel into single lumen, and then did a QLOT over that. And that is one of the rare cases where I've done the QLOT, but it is a very challenging case to do a instant restenosis in the left main, particularly done earlier by SKS technique.
Yeah. I think it is very heartening to see, sir, somebody from Dr. Islam from Dhaka also raised this antiplated question which I've asked. Dr. Gaurav Arora from Delhi is also asking. And my colleague from Apollo, Dr. Tripti Deb, thank you, madam, for joining. And she wants to know what is the role of imaging like OCT, IVUS in left main stenting. Does it help to improve MACE? I think recently Dr. Gary Mitz in one of his webinars also and previously also elegantly shown both by usage of imaging, IVUS and OCT, though initially some of the trials did not show the major differences in outcomes. But now we have data to show that not only in direction of complications like restenosis and the stent thrombosis, but even the long-term results like patients surviving longer is also demonstrated by the effective usage of OCT and IVUS. The question comes, which one do you prefer? Obviously, which is available and which one you are comfortable with is more important. And whichever one only the question comes in the osteal imaging, probably IVUS scores a little more OCT. But OCT has the advantage of making the lesions crystal clear, especially if you're seeing for opposition and all. For new learners also, it is easy to learn OCT. That's how OCT is becoming more popular. And Abbott is also very active in promoting this technology. Wherever you want, they get the machines. And that's how the patients are getting the benefit of it. We should also congratulate Abbott for it. Dr. R.D. Yadav, Batra.
Just one second. I'll like to add on that.
Sir.
You see, a couple of years ago, about 7-8 years ago, when we were not very aggressive in using any of these imaging modalities in our left main bifurcation, we also, like others, had this feeling that, oh, well, our results are as good as anybody's else. Once you start doing it, then you understand the importance of these technologies. Now, suffice it to say here that a stent which is LED which is 3.5 and you have a left main which is 5 millimeter. How would you know that this is 5 millimeter and you have to put a stent which can go up to 5 millimeter from 3.5 to 5? So it is only the imaging techniques. What is the carina angle? What is the distribution of the plaque in the circumflex? All these are known by imaging. That's one. Gary Mills, in one of the articles which was published only last year in 2019, a meta-analysis of several studies showed that the long-term results, MACE is reduced by 50% if in patients who underwent left main stenting using IVUS. Of course, OCT was not in that, and IVUS compared to angiography. There is another meta-analysis which has also come up with a long-term follow-up and has also shown similar results, that there is a significant reduction in MACE using any of the imaging modalities when you do a left vein stenting compared to when you do only angiographic follow-up. So I think there is no doubt that if you have the capability and the infrastructure to use any of these modalities, well, that's a point which may not be discussed here, that whether you should OCT or IVUS, but certainly OCT gives you some different information, IVUS gives you some different information, but both are complementary to each other. And any of those two technologies with which you are comfortable must be used. That's the point I would like to re-emphasize.
Thank you, sir. Another interesting one study recently I noted, sir, people who have used imaging and did some change in that, did some extra step after the results of imaging, not only doing just imaging for the sake of doing it, but what it shows, you have to able to correct what the abnormality it shows. And interestingly, for people in which the procedure, something else was done after the imaging, the outcomes was better compared to those which just imaging was done. So it's also important to take imaging seriously and do according to what it says.
Exactly.
And, one question actually which bothers me, my colleague Dr. Gokul Reddy wants to know from you, sir. What is your opinion regarding interventional management of an isolated LCX ostial critical stenosis of a left dominant coronary system? Left dominant system, only ostial LCX disease.
No, that's a very interesting and very challenging situation, because ostial LCX is peculiar from 2 points of view. One is, here you're talking of a dominant LCX, obviously it needs a treatment. Number two is the restenosis rate, if you consider all areas in the coronary tree, is highest at the LCX origin. So therefore, the problem is how to use this technique. Now, I would do possibly a imaging in this patient and be sure that the LAD is free of disease, or LMC is free of disease. If I find any plaque, even if it is not a significant stenosis, I would possibly use a 2-stent strategy here, stent the LCX ostium and LAD, depending upon various other factors which I have described, and cover the LCX to the extent that it protrudes very well into the LMCA. But if in a situation where there is no plaque in the LAD and also no plaque in the LMCA, which is very unlikely or less likely, then you have no other choice except to do some sort of a debulking technique or a bed preparation by using a cutting balloon. I use ROTA. In fact, all those cases that I have used LCX osteosis, isolated LCX osteosis, I do a ROTA and take it to almost maximum size of bar that is available to us is 1.75 if it is a big size LCX, and then stent the LCX with a stent still protruding about a millimeter or 2 in the LMC, because I'm not scared if you keep the stent 1 millimeter protruding into the LMCA. It does not cause any stent thrombosis, provided it does not cause any pinching of the LAD, so that the angle has to provide apart. This is how I would like to manage this case.
Thank you, sir. This is Dr. R.D. Yadav, whom you also know from Batra, that wants to know what is the role of thrombossuction in current scenario. Though it is not definitely related to left main, but you have shown MI cases, he wants to know from you.
Well, there is no doubt that there are several studies which have now shown that thrombossuction done or without thrombossuction, the long-term outcome is the same. But I think before you look at the long-term outcome, important is you should be able to first get the results out. Patient should be able to get out of the cath lab. And all of you, I'm sure all of the people who are sitting here, you would agree with me that thrombossuction does a wonderful job in acute MI. You do a thrombossuction, you start seeing the vessel very well. And after you have done the thrombossuction, then you take a decision of putting in the size of the stent, etc. can be done. Now, whether in long term it will do any good or not, well, studies have not supported this thrombossuction. But in real day practice, I would do thrombossuction in all those cases where there is a big thrombus load. Minor thrombus load or still flowing artery with a 99%, you may not do it. But in all those big vessels where there is a big thrombus load, thrombossuction should be done, and I do it.
I think trials cannot show, sir, because it is very difficult to produce a trial with all the thrombus load exactly in the similar manner in the larger vessels. That's how the trials could come negative. But that's where our judgment should come as a clinician and experience come. And we have seen a lot of patients improving with thrombosuction. It should not be taken light. But where previously even minor thrombus we used to do, that sort of thing is slightly enthusiasm has decreased. But as sir said, it has definitely a role. And many congratulating messages have come, sir. I'm not going through all of it because of sake of time.
One more point here, Srinivas, which I have late I'm doing is
Yeah. Yes.
I'm doing quite often OCT in acute coronary syndrome, which means acute coronary syndrome, both non-STEMI and STEMI. And after thrombosuction, we do a OCT in these patients. Now, I have seen, it's not a very big experience. I have done almost about 9 or 10 patients by now. And I have seen that out of these 9 or 10 patients, one patient, we found that there was no underlying significant rupture of the plaque or ulceration of the plaque. It was only a big thrombus with minor ulceration. And in just after thrombosuction, we found that the lumen looked good and the thrombus was aspirated and the flow was TIMI3, and we did not have to stent this patient. So that is something which can be done only by using OCT and thrombosuction. So you can avoid doing a stent, and in fact there is a study which has come from Korea of 20 patients where they have done thrombosuction, and they are looking at this as an ongoing possibly a project that where there is no rupture of the plaque, only it's a plaque erosion, where only thrombosuction may help and you may not need a stent. But it is only OCT which will tell you whether it's a plaque erosion or a plaque rupture. And a plaque erosion with thrombosuction may not require a stent.
Especially in young scenarios, some of the patients where we see thrombus, once it's sucked out, many times you could get away even without usage of stent, which is now we have a technique to demonstrate by OCT. If it is only erosion, I think they will get away. I think we are coming to the end, sir. One last question. What is your opinion on the new debulking technique, lithotripsy?
Acute?
What is your opinion on the new debulking technique, lithotripsy? Lithotripsy. Shockwave lithotripsy. SW.
Very interesting. In fact, I had done a webinar only about a week ago on diffusely diseased, highly calcified arteries. Of course, the topic was rotablation in unusual indications. Okay. And in that, I showed rotablation in graft, and the case which I showed today also, diffusely highly calcified LED with a carcinoma of the glottis, and I'm sure you saw this case. Yes. Now, I imagine and I can understand that how can a technique like intravascular lithotripsy perform these kind of procedures? No, that's one. It is only a substitute to possibly cutting balloon, that's all. It is not a substitute to rotablation, because where you can do long lesions, highly calcified, superficial, and even deep calcification can be done with a rotablation. So I don't see much future of a IVL, etc. That's one. Number two, in the series that I quoted in that article, which came in circulation last year, the first 62 patients which were done in IVL, the trial, I've forgotten the name of the trial, there the initial pre-dilatation with balloon was required in 24% of the cases. So if you have to use the initial pre-dilatation in 24% of the cases, well, you may start doing you may rather leave a procedure. Third thing is the cost. The balloon itself costs about 2.5 lakh, and it gives only 10 pulses per second, and you can give up to 8 cycles, 10 pulses per cycle, and you can do only 8 cycles with one balloon. That means you can possibly do only, and the balloons are available only lengths of 12, I think 12 and 16, etc., or 8 and 12. So if you have to do long lesions, you will need 3-4 balloons. So you can very well imagine 2.5 lakh into 4, 10 lakh. So why can't we do a rota? So I don't see much future for the simple reason that in vast majority of the cases there where we do rota, we find it difficult even sometimes the bird to even cross. So where is the question of the IVL balloon to cross these kind of reasons? So you may, and in fact, the technique should be rota IVL. You should first do a rota and then go on to IVL. That's my personal opinion. Srinivas is lost.
Do you hear me? Hello?
Yeah.
Yes, sir. I think because the time is up, it's coming to the end. Again, many congratulatory messages, but I think you'll be happy to know this Professor Emuni, JNMU and AMU Aligarh, want to convey congratulations to both you and me because he was particular to inform you. Thank you, sir. And the final question is Dr. H. Reddy from Care Hospital, Hyderabad wants to know what are the current guidelines for the left main intervention after 5 years of excellent results? Is there any current changes now? That's what I mentioned. Now it has become a class 1 indication for lower tertiary groups, and then in intermediate ones, now it is class 2A. And bifurcation, still it is yet to go because guidelines will form after multiple case experiences and multiple studies like this. I think guidelines would be changed. But as of now, bifurcation is not a class 1. No, sir. What do you say finally on this?
Well, I would say that
Lost
I
Gambhir?
think, as the things are moving on,
I think we are coming to the...
From class 2B, it has gone to class 2.
We are able to hear you intermittently.
Can you hear me?
Okay. Right. Yeah, I can hear you, sir. Please go ahead.
Class 2B, it has become class 2A, and now it has become class 1. So I'm sure with the experience being gained over the time, even a left main bifurcation in at least a non-diabetic patient, it will become a class 1 very early, very quickly. It is not very long, it is going to take.
Yes. And as in emergencies, so there's no question of any data or anything. As sir said, surgeon will never attempt it. You should be always comfortable. But only thing to do it in emergencies, you have to do in some stable cases, as what sir mentioned. I think we had a very good discussion. Thanks for all your time, sir. I think there are more complimentary meetings coming up. Thank you again for showing excellent demonstration. I thank everybody for logged in on behalf of FACS Foundation. And we also thank all our colleagues across the country who are logged in and shared their thoughts and asked the questions. Thank you, sir. Thank you again. So we'll all... any final comments? Bye, sir. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think I really enjoyed presenting these cases, and I hope the participants have been benefited out of whatever little experience I have got in left main bifurcation stenting. And this will give them an impetus, this will give them a stimulus to go on to bifurcation, and then from bifurcation, from simple to more complex cases. But I think time will teach them, and one has to learn on his own by making some mistakes. But of course, in left main bifurcation, you cannot afford to do mistakes because it's a sudden catastrophe. So I think first do some simple cases of left main bifurcation and then go into complex. With that, I think I would once again thank Dr. Srinivas, Abbott, and all other friends who have joined us in this webinar.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.